The Library That Only Opens at Midnight, an original mystery story. There was no sign pointing toward the library. No map showed its location. No website mentioned its existence. And yet, every person who had ever entered it remembered the same thing. The clock always struck midnight, just before the front door appeared. In the small town of Ravenshire, there was an old cobblestone street that ended abruptly at a brick wall. Children played there during the day. Shops opened every morning. Tourists walked past without noticing anything unusual. But the elderly residents always avoided that street after dark. If someone asked why, they simply smiled. Because some doors are only meant to open once. Lucas Bennett was 27 years old and worked as an archivist at the local museum. His entire life revolved around old documents, forgotten diaries, and dusty photographs. He loved history because history never changed. People did. History didn't. One rainy evening, while cataloging a box of donated papers, Lucas discovered a folded note hidden inside an old leather journal. It contained only one sentence: "Meet me at the end of Ash Street at exactly 12 a.m. There was no signature, no date, only one strange symbol drawn beneath the words, a key inside a circle. Lucas assumed it was part of an old puzzle. Still, his curiosity refused to let go. The following night, 5 minutes before midnight, Lucas stood at the end of Ash Street. Rain tapped softly against the empty pavement. The brick wall stood exactly where it always had. Nothing happened. He checked his watch. 11:59. The town church bell began to ring. 1, 2, 3. By the 12th bell, the wall disappeared. In its place stood a magnificent library, 3 stories tall. Its windows glowed with warm golden light. Ancient stone columns framed enormous wooden doors carved with thousands of tiny keys. Above the entrance, silver letters slowly appeared. The Midnight Library. Then the doors opened. Inside, the silence felt different. Not empty, comfortable, like the room itself was listening. Bookshelves stretched farther than Lucas could see. Some reached the ceiling. Others curved into corridors that seemed impossible inside a normal building. Every shelf carried identical black books. No titles, no labels, only small silver numbers on each spine. An elderly librarian stood behind the front desk. She wore round glasses and a deep blue coat. "You came," she said. Lucas frowned. "You were expecting me?" The librarian smiled. "We always expect those who receive the letter." Lucas looked around. There are no other visitors. There rarely are. What kind of library is this? The librarian handed him a brass key. A library of unfinished lives. He laughed nervously. "I don't understand." "You will." She led him to shelf 327. Thousands of identical books surrounded them. She stopped before one volume, silver number 914. She placed it in Lucas's hands. "Open it." Inside was his birth certificate. The next page contained a photograph from his 5th birthday, then his first day of school, his graduation, his first job. Every memory, every conversation, every decision, his entire life, written in perfect detail. Lucas turned page after page in disbelief. "This is impossible." The librarian nodded. "Every visitor finds the same thing." "My life?" "Not quite. Keep reading. Near the final pages, the story suddenly stopped. Blank paper followed. Why is the rest empty? Because it hasn't happened yet. Lucas stared at the unfinished pages. So I can see my future? The librarian gently shook her head. No, but you may understand it. She walked toward another shelf. This library contains more than memories. She removed another black book. Its cover looked identical, but inside, everything was different. Lucas saw himself as a musician. Another showed him as a teacher. Another as a doctor. One showed him living in Paris, another in Tokyo. Each book told the story of a different life. Lives that could have existed if he had made different choices. These aren't fantasies, the librarian explained. They are possibilities. Lucas spent hours reading. In one life, he had become famous. In another, he had married his childhood friend. In another, he had never left his hometown. Some lives seemed happier. Others ended in loneliness. No version was perfect. Every choice solved one problem and created another. The realization unsettled him. He had spent years regretting old decisions. Now he saw that every road carried its own burdens. As he closed another book, he noticed something strange. One shelf stood completely empty. Only a small sign hung above it. Books that have been erased. What happened here? The librarian's smile faded. Those belonged to people who tried to stay. Stay? In another life. Lucas frowned. You mean they entered one of these books? She nodded, and never returned. Before Lucas could ask another question, a loud crash echoed somewhere deep inside the library. The lights flickered. Books began sliding from shelves. The librarian looked alarmed for the first time. They found us. Who? She whispered only one word. The collectors. From the darkness between the shelves, figures slowly appeared. They wore long gray coats. Their faces remained hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. Each carried an empty black book. They walked silently, never running, never speaking, only searching. Lucas whispered, "What do they want?" The librarian answered quietly, "Forgotten lives." She hurried him through endless corridors. The library exists because every choice deserves to be remembered. The collectors erase abandoned possibilities. They believe only one story should survive. Lucas looked back. The gray figures continued walking, always the same distance behind, never faster, never slower. Finally, they reached a spiral staircase leading upward. At the top stood a single door, no handle, only a keyhole. The brass key, the librarian said. Lucas inserted it. The door opened. Inside was a circular room with only one book resting on a wooden table. Unlike every other book, this one had a title, The Life You Haven't Lived Yet. Lucas slowly opened it. Every page was blank. There's nothing here. The librarian smiled. Exactly. The future isn't written. It belongs to you. Suddenly, the gray figures entered the room. They stopped only a few feet away. One of them reached toward the blank book. The librarian stepped between them. If they erase that book, they erase possibility itself. Lucas looked at the empty pages, then at the collectors. Without fully understanding why, he picked up a pen lying beside the book. He wrote one sentence. Tomorrow, I choose without regret. The blank pages burst into brilliant white light. The collectors froze. One by one, they dissolved into drifting paper. Silence returned. The librarian closed the book gently. "You've remembered the rule." "What rule?" "That the future cannot be stolen. It can only be written." The great-grandfather clock somewhere inside the library struck 1. The building trembled softly. "Your time is over." Lucas looked around one last time. "Will I ever come back?" The librarian smiled. "Only if you stop living." When Lucas stepped outside, the library disappeared. The brick wall stood exactly where it always had. His watch read 12:01. Only 1 minute had passed. Yet he carried the brass key in his pocket. Life slowly returned to normal. Lucas continued working at the museum, but he stopped regretting the past. He accepted opportunities instead of fearing them. He traveled. He repaired broken friendships. He finally wrote the history book he had dreamed about for years. Not because he knew the future, but because he understood something more valuable. No life is perfect, only unfinished. 20 years later, an elderly Lucas walked once more to the end of Ash Street. It was raining. The church bell began to ring. 12 slow chimes echoed through the sleeping town. The brick wall vanished. The library returned. The same warm lights, the same wooden doors, the same librarian. She smiled exactly as she had years before. "I was wondering when you'd visit again." Lucas held up the brass key. "I never lost it." "I know." She handed him a single black book. This time, it was full. Every page, every chapter, every choice. Lucas smiled. "I think I'm ready to shelve it." The librarian nodded. "You always were." She carefully placed his book onto a shelf among millions of others. Not because his story was extraordinary, but because every finished life deserves a place where it will never be forgotten. Today, the people of Ravenshire still avoid the end of Ash Street after midnight. Most believe the old stories are nothing more than legends, but every so often, someone finds an unsigned note tucked inside an old book. It contains only one sentence: "Meet me at the end of Ash Street at exactly 12 a.m. Most people throw it away. A few become curious. And somewhere, behind a brick wall that doesn't always exist, an old librarian quietly waits, ready to help another stranger discover that the greatest story in any library is the one that hasn't been written yet. The end. The clock that could stop time. An original mystery story. In the old town of Belwick, there was a clock tower that had not worked for 70 years. It stood in the center of the town square, taller than every roof around it. Its stone walls were covered with ivy. Its iron hands were frozen at exactly 4:44. No one knew why. Some said lightning had destroyed the mechanism. Others said the clockmaker had locked something inside. But the oldest people in Belwick always gave the same warning: never repair the tower clock. Oliver Reed heard that warning on the day he returned home. He was 32 years old, a quiet man with tired eyes and careful hands. Like his father before him, Oliver repaired watches, pocket watches, wall clocks, old music boxes, anything built from gears, springs, and patience. He had left Belwick years ago, hoping never to return. But after his father died, Oliver inherited the small clock shop beside the town square. The shop was dusty, the windows were dim, and on the workbench lay an unfinished repair order. It was for the clock tower, signed by his father, dated the day before he died. At first, Oliver ignored it. Everyone in town told him to. The baker shook her head.
The tower is better left silent. The postman whispered, "Your father knew that too late." Even the mayor warned him. "That clock is part of history. Leave it alone." But Oliver did not believe in curses. To him, clocks were machines. If a clock stopped, there was always a reason. So one rainy evening, he unlocked the tower door and climbed the narrow spiral staircase. At the top, behind the giant clock face, he found the mechanism. Hundreds of brass gears, chains as thick as rope, a pendulum taller than a man. Everything was covered in dust. Everything, except one small silver gear. It was perfectly clean, as if someone had touched it that morning. Oliver spent 3 nights studying the machine. The tower clock was unlike anything he had ever seen. Some gears turned forward, others turned backward. A few were marked with symbols instead of numbers. On the 4th night, he found a hidden compartment beneath the pendulum. Inside was his father's journal. The final page contained only one sentence. "If the clock moves again, do not let it strike 5." Oliver read it twice. Then he looked at the frozen hands. 4:44. Only 16 minutes before 5. Curiosity overpowered fear. Oliver replaced the broken spring, cleaned the silver gear, adjusted the pendulum. Then, the clock ticked. A single sound echoed through the tower. Tick. The whole town below went silent. Oliver froze. Tick. The hands moved. 4:45. Outside, rain stopped in midair. Not slowed, stopped. Individual raindrops hung like glass beads in the air. A bird remained frozen above the square. A woman carrying groceries stood motionless on the street. Even the wind had disappeared. Oliver rushed down the stairs. The world had stopped. Everything except him. For several minutes, Oliver could barely breathe. He walked through the square, touching frozen raindrops with his fingertips. They shattered like tiny crystals. He waved his hand before the baker's face. She did not blink. A clock in a shop window showed 4:45. Every clock in town showed the same time. Then, the tower bell rang once. Time returned. Rain fell all at once. The bird flew away. People continued walking as if nothing had happened. No one remembered the pause. No one, except Oliver. The next night, Oliver returned to the tower. He wanted to understand. At 4:46, the clock ticked again. Time stopped. This time, he was ready. He explored the town, entered locked rooms, read letters on desks, listened to the silence of a world without movement. It felt impossible, beautiful, terrifying. When the bell rang, time restarted. Oliver realized the truth. The clock did not simply tell time, it controlled it. Every tick after 4:44 gave him another moment outside the world. But the warning remained. Do not let it strike 5. At first, Oliver used the clock carefully. A child dropped a glass bottle near the road. Oliver stopped time and moved the child away before a speeding carriage passed. An elderly man slipped on icy steps. Oliver paused the world and placed a cushion beneath him. A fire began in the bakery. Oliver stopped time, smothered the flames, and left before anyone knew. The town called it luck. Oliver knew better. For the first time since losing his father, he felt useful, powerful, almost necessary.
But each time he stopped time, something changed. Small things at first. Flowers bloomed too early. Milk spoiled in sealed bottles. People forgot words mid-sentence. Watches across town began losing minutes, then hours. One morning, a little girl asked her mother, "Why did yesterday happen twice?" Oliver heard it and felt cold. The clock was not freezing time for free. It was borrowing moments from somewhere else. He returned to his father's journal and found pages stuck together. Hidden writing appeared only under candlelight. His father had discovered the truth years earlier. The tower clock had been built by Elias Vorn, a mysterious clockmaker who vanished in 1891. Vorn believed time was not a river, it was a lock, and every lock could be opened. He built the tower clock to pause the world for one purpose: to save his dying daughter. At 4:44 one afternoon, she fell from a bridge. Vorn stopped time and rescued her. But the next day, someone else died in her place. Then another. Then another. The clock did not prevent loss. It only moved it. Vorn tried to destroy the machine, but before he could, the clock struck 5, and the entire town lost one full day. No one remembered it, except Vorn. After that, he disappeared inside the tower. Oliver closed the journal, trembling. The clock hands now showed 4:58. Only 2 minutes remained. He had used it too many times. The mechanism was moving toward 5 on its own. That night, the town changed. People froze for seconds without warning. Shadows moved after their owners had stopped. The church bell rang at the wrong hour. Children woke from dreams speaking dates that had not arrived yet. Belwick was slipping out of time, and Oliver knew it was his fault. At 4:59, the tower began to shake. The bell prepared to strike. Oliver climbed the stairs with his tools, desperate to stop the mechanism. Inside the clock room, gears spun faster than impossible. The pendulum swung through the air without sound. Then he saw someone standing beside it. A man in an old black coat, pale, thin, watching. "Elias Vorn," Oliver whispered. The man turned. His eyes looked older than the tower itself. "You repaired what should have remained broken," Oliver shouted over the shaking gears. "Help me stop it." Vorn smiled sadly. "I tried." "What happens when it strikes 5? The town loses another day." "And where does the day go?" Vorn looked toward the pendulum. "To the clock." Oliver understood. The missing time was not gone. It was trapped inside the machine. Every saved moment, every stolen second, every life rearranged. All of it waited behind the clock face. The only way to release it was to break the silver gear. But Vorn warned him, "If you break it, time will return to everyone." "What does that mean?" "You will remember every borrowed moment." "And they won't?" "They will live." Oliver looked through the clock face at the town below. Lights glowing in windows, families eating dinner, children laughing in the rain. A town moving toward a future it did not know it had almost lost. He thought of his father, of the unfinished repair order, of the warning he had ignored. Then Oliver raised his hammer. The clock struck once. The first note of 5 echoed across Belwick. Oliver swung. The hammer hit the silver gear. A blinding light filled the tower. The mechanism screamed like metal tearing through years. The pendulum stopped. The gears shattered. And time broke open. Oliver saw everything. The child he had saved. The fire he had stopped. The man who should have fallen. The days Vorn had stolen. The daughter on the bridge. His father climbing the tower. Generations of paused moments flooded into his mind. Seconds, minutes, hours, years. Every borrowed piece of time returned at once. Then, silence. Morning came. The people of Belwick woke to find the tower clock completely destroyed. Its hands had fallen into the square. Its face was cracked. The bell hung silent forever. No one remembered anything strange. They only knew that the old tower had finally collapsed inside. Oliver Reed was found at the base of the staircase.
alive, but changed. His hair had turned white, his hands trembled, and although he was only 32, his eyes looked like they had watched 100 years pass. Oliver never repaired another clock. He closed his father's shop and turned it into a small library. Above the door, he placed the broken silver gear inside a glass frame. No label, no explanation, only a small sentence carved beneath it. Some time is not meant to be saved. People often asked what it meant. Oliver would smile gently and say, "It means today is enough."
Years later, children still played beneath the silent clock tower. Tourists took photographs. Historians argued about why the mechanism was so unusual. Engineers tried to understand the broken gears. No one ever could. And sometimes, just before rain begins, people in Belwick say the town square becomes strangely quiet. For one breath, one heartbeat, one impossible second. As if the world remembers what it felt like to stop. Then time moves on, as it always should. The end. The Final Witness, an original mystery story. Every mystery has witnesses. Some tell the truth, some hide it, and sometimes there is only one witness left. The problem is, that witness doesn't remember what they saw. On the outskirts of the quiet town of Greywood stood Blackwater Manor, an enormous stone mansion surrounded by pine trees and thick morning fog. For nearly 80 years, the house had remained empty. People avoided it, not because they believed it was haunted, but because of what had happened there. In the winter of 1946, 8 people entered the mansion for a private dinner. The next morning, only one person walked out. An 11-year-old boy named Samuel Hart. He was covered in dust. He carried no injuries. He spoke only one sentence. They were already gone when the clock stopped. After that, Samuel never spoke about the mansion again. Doctors questioned him. Police questioned him. Journalists questioned him. For decades, he always gave the same answer: "I don't remember." The case became known as the Blackwater Mystery. No one ever solved it. 78 years later, true crime journalist Emma Carter arrived in Greywood. She had spent years investigating forgotten cold cases. Most people searched for evidence. Emma searched for stories, because every unsolved mystery eventually became buried beneath silence. She believed this one still had a voice. Someone simply hadn't listened carefully enough. The only surviving witness, Samuel Hart, was now 89 years old. He lived alone in a small cottage beside a lake. When Emma knocked on his door, he already seemed to know why she had come. "You've come about Blackwater." Emma nodded. "I only want to know what happened." Samuel looked toward the frozen lake. "So do I." Inside the cottage, every clock had stopped. Not broken, stopped. Each one showed exactly 9:18. Emma noticed it immediately. "Why don't your clocks work?" Samuel smiled faintly. "They do. They've just reached the only time they remember." Emma didn't understand, but she wrote the answer down anyway. For several days, Samuel refused to discuss the night at Blackwater Manor. Instead, he spoke about ordinary things: fishing, snow, books, old photographs. Then one afternoon, Emma noticed a faded picture hanging above the fireplace. 8 adults stood outside the mansion. In front of them, a young Samuel smiled at the camera. Emma counted again. 8 adults, 1 child, 9 people altogether. She looked at Samuel.
but police reports only mention 8 guests. Samuel stared at the photograph. His face slowly lost its color. "There were 9, he whispered. "They forgot him." That single sentence changed everything. Emma returned to the police archives. She searched every newspaper from 1946, every witness statement, every official report. Each one listed 8 guests, not 9. It was as if the man in the photograph had never existed. Yet there he was, standing beside everyone else. His face wasn't blurred. It wasn't damaged. He was simply unknown. Emma enlarged the photograph. On the back, someone had written one sentence: "Never let the 9th guest leave first." There was no signature, no explanation, only those words. That night, Emma decided to visit Blackwater Manor alone. The front doors hung open. The air smelled of old wood and cold stone. Moonlight spilled through broken windows. Everything inside remained exactly as police photographs had shown decades earlier. A dining table, 9 chairs, not 8, 9. One chair had always been hidden beneath a fallen chandelier during the original investigation. No one had noticed. Or perhaps, no one had wanted to. At precisely 9:18 p.m., every clock inside the mansion began ticking. The sound echoed through empty hallways. Tick, tick, tick. Emma's flashlight flickered. The dining room grew strangely cold. Then she heard footsteps, not behind her, above her. Slow, measured, as though someone walked across the second floor. She called out. No answer. Only another footstep. Following the sound, Emma climbed the staircase. The upstairs hallway was lined with old portraits. Each painting showed members of the Hart family, until the final portrait. It had been removed. Only a clean rectangle remained on the dusty wall. Below it, a brass plaque still hung. The name had been scratched away. Inside the last bedroom, Emma found a leather journal beneath loose floorboards. The first page belonged to Jonathan Hart, owner of Blackwater Manor. The entries described preparations for the famous dinner. 8 invited guests. Then one final sentence: "I hope he accepts." Who? No name followed. Only that sentence. The final journal entry stopped abruptly, halfway through a line. "The 9th chair remains empty, but I hear someone climbing the stairs." Nothing more. Emma returned to Samuel the next morning. This time, he agreed to tell his story. "I remember the dinner. I remember the snow. I remember the candles. What I don't remember is leaving." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" Samuel looked frightened. "I remember arriving. I remember sitting beside my father. I remember the clocks stopping. Then, I remember waking outside. Everything in between is gone." Emma showed him the photograph. Samuel stared for nearly a minute. Then tears filled his eyes. "I know him." "Who is he?" "My brother." Emma froze. "You had a brother?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Everyone forgot." According to official records, Samuel Hart had always been an only child. Birth certificates confirmed it. School records confirmed it. Census records confirmed it. Yet Samuel insisted he had an older brother named Daniel, a brother no document now mentioned. Emma searched church records. Nothing. School yearbooks. Nothing. Hospital records. Nothing. It was as if Daniel Hart had been erased from history. except for one photograph and one old man's fading memory. That evening, Emma returned to the mansion with Samuel. As the grandfather clock approached 9:18, Samuel whispered, "This is where it happened." The clock struck once. Every candle in the dining room suddenly ignited. 9 flames, 9 chairs, 9 shadows. One chair slowly slid backward, empty, waiting. Samuel stared into the darkness, then quietly said, "Daniel?" A voice answered, "So you remembered." The room fell silent. Emma couldn't see anyone, only the voice, calm, gentle, almost relieved. "I waited for 78 years." Samuel began crying. "I'm sorry. I couldn't remember." "You weren't supposed to." The voice explained everything. On that winter night in 1946, Jonathan Hart had gathered his family to reveal an old inheritance hidden beneath the mansion. 9 people entered. Only one could choose whether the family secret survived. Daniel volunteered. The hidden chamber beneath the manor contained records exposing powerful people responsible for wartime crimes and stolen fortunes. If revealed immediately, innocent family members would become targets. Daniel sealed the chamber. But to protect everyone, he accepted a strange bargain described in an ancient Hart family journal. One person would remain as the keeper. The world would slowly forget he ever existed. Only one witness, his younger brother, would carry the memory, until he remembered again. Samuel whispered, "So you've been alone? For all these years?" "I wasn't alone. I had time." The voice almost smiled. "But memories fade. I was afraid everyone would forget why I stayed." The floor beneath the dining room slowly opened. A hidden staircase appeared. Emma and Samuel descended together. Below the mansion lay a stone archive. Boxes filled with letters, maps, photographs, financial records, evidence long believed destroyed. Enough to solve dozens of forgotten crimes. Enough to restore the names of innocent victims. Enough to finally tell the truth. As Emma collected the documents, the voice spoke once more. "My promise is finished." The room grew warmer. The candles extinguished themselves. The 9th chair upstairs quietly returned to its place. Samuel looked toward the darkness. "Will I see you again?" "No. But now, people will remember." The following year, Emma published The Final Witness, a best-selling investigation that reopened multiple historical cases. Governments recovered stolen property. Families learned the truth about relatives long forgotten. Blackwater Manor became a museum dedicated to unsolved mysteries, finally resolved. Visitors often stopped before one particular photograph. 9 people stood together outside the mansion. For the first time in nearly 80 years, the plaque beneath it listed every name, including Daniel Hart. Samuel passed away peacefully 2 years later. Among his belongings, Emma found one final handwritten note. It contained only a single sentence. "The truth never disappears. It only waits for someone willing to remember." Today, tour guides still tell visitors about Blackwater Manor. Most come expecting a ghost story. Instead, they leave with something else:
A reminder that history is not only written by those who speak. Sometimes, history survives because one forgotten witness finally remembers. The end.
The Lighthouse That Never Turned Off, an original mystery story. On the far edge of the Maine coast, where the Atlantic Ocean crashed against black cliffs, there stood a lighthouse called Greyhaven Light. It was built in 1891 to guide ships through one of the most dangerous stretches of water in New England. For more than a century, storms came and went. Keepers changed, ships changed, the world changed. But Greyhaven Light never went dark. Not once. Not during hurricanes, not during power failures, not even after the lighthouse was abandoned. Every night, exactly at sunset, its beam turned across the ocean. Slow, steady, silent. And no one knew who was turning it on. The last official keeper of Greyhaven was a man named Thomas Reed. He lived alone in the keeper's house for 34 years. People in the nearby town of Bellport described him as quiet, polite, and strangely devoted to routine. Every evening at 6:40, he climbed the spiral staircase to the lantern room. Every morning at 5:10, he walked down to the shore and checked the rocks. When people asked why he worked so carefully in an age of electric signals and automated systems, Thomas always gave the same answer. The sea remembers every mistake. No one understood what he meant. Then, in the winter of 1987, Thomas disappeared. It happened during a storm, not an ordinary coastal storm, a storm so powerful that windows shook in Bellport and fishing boats snapped free from their moorings. The next morning, when the supply truck arrived at Greyhaven, the keeper's house was empty. His boots were beside the door. His coat hung from a chair. A cup of tea sat on the table, still half full. But Thomas Reed was gone. The lighthouse beam was still turning. Search teams explored the cliffs. Divers checked the water. Police searched the house, the rocks, and the shoreline. They found no footprints leading away, no broken railing, no body. Only Thomas's logbook lying open on the desk. The final entry was dated the night of the storm. It contained 5 words: "The light must not stop." After Thomas vanished, the Coast Guard inspected Greyhaven Light. They discovered something impossible. The electrical system had failed years earlier. The backup generator was empty. The old lamp mechanism was corroded. By every practical measure, the lighthouse should not have worked. And yet, every night, its beam swept across the water. Local fishermen stopped joking about Thomas Reed. They began watching the lighthouse differently, with respect and fear. Years passed. The lighthouse was officially closed. The road to Greyhaven was blocked. The keeper's house fell into disrepair. But the light continued. Tourists came to photograph it from the distant beach. Teenagers dared each other to climb the fence. Writers called it a local legend. Scientists blamed reflection, atmosphere, or misreported sightings. But sailors knew better. On foggy nights, many claimed Greyhaven's beam appeared exactly when their navigation systems failed. It had saved ships, more than once. In 2024, a documentary filmmaker named Claire Morgan arrived in Bellport. She specialized in forgotten American mysteries, abandoned towns, lost stations, old buildings with impossible stories. Greyhaven Light was supposed to be her next short film. At first, she expected exaggeration. Every town had a legend. Every legend grew over time. But Bellport was different. No one seemed eager to talk. When Claire asked about the lighthouse,
People lowered their voices. An old fisherman named Martin Hale finally agreed to meet her at the harbor. He pointed toward the cliffs. "You can film it from here," he said, "but don't go inside." Claire smiled. "Why?" Martin looked at her carefully. "Because that place doesn't need visitors." Claire didn't believe in warnings. That evening, she drove along the old service road until she reached the locked gate. Beyond it, Greyhaven stood against the darkening sky, tall, white, silent. The keeper's house leaned beside it, its windows black and broken. Claire climbed over the gate with her camera bag. The air smelled of salt, wet stone, and old wood. As the sun touched the horizon, she set up her camera. Then, exactly at sunset, the lantern room glowed. A warm golden light bloomed behind the glass. The great beam turned slowly across the sea. Claire forgot to breathe. There was no sound of machinery, no hum, no generator, only light.
She entered the keeper's house first. Inside, dust covered everything. A rusted stove, a broken chair, a calendar from 1987. On the desk lay a copy of Thomas Reed's old logbook. Claire filmed each page. Most entries were ordinary: weather, tide height, visibility, passing ships. Then, near the end, the entries changed. January 3rd, heard knocking from below the tower. January 9th, light turned itself on before sunset. January 18th, saw a ship where no ship appeared on radar. January 25th, the sea is asking again. Claire paused. The handwriting grew shakier with each page. Then came the final entry. The light must not stop. Against every instinct, Claire walked to the lighthouse door. It opened easily. Inside, the spiral staircase climbed into darkness. Her flashlight revealed peeling paint and rusted railings. Step by step, she climbed. At the top, the lantern room glowed with impossible warmth. The old lens rotated slowly, though no motor moved it. In the center of the room stood something strange. A brass oil lantern, polished, clean, burning with a small blue flame. Claire moved closer. The flame did not flicker, even though wind leaked through cracked glass. Beside the lantern lay a folded note. The paper looked new. On it were 2 words: "Hello, Claire." She dropped the note. Her camera slipped from her hand but kept recording. No one knew she was here. No one could have written her name. The lighthouse beam suddenly stopped turning. For the first time anyone could remember, Greyhaven light froze. Its beam pointed directly out to sea. Claire looked through the glass. Far beyond the rocks, in the fog, she saw lights. A ship, large, old, moving silently toward the cliffs. She grabbed her radio. Nothing but static. Her phone had no signal. Below, waves exploded against the rocks. The ship kept coming. Then a voice spoke behind her. "Now you understand." Claire turned. An old man stood near the staircase. White beard, keeper's coat, calm eyes. Thomas Reed. He looked exactly like the photograph in town records, not a day older. Claire could not speak. Thomas looked toward the sea. "It comes every time the light weakens." "What comes?" Claire whispered. He answered softly, "The ship that should have sunk." The story came slowly. In 1891, on the first night Greyhaven Light was tested, a passenger vessel called the Maribel had entered the fog during a storm. The lighthouse was supposed to guide it away from the rocks, but the first keeper had fallen asleep. The light went dark for only 13 minutes. The Maribel struck the reef. More than 100 people were lost. After that night, every keeper of Greyhaven claimed to hear voices in the tower.
Not angry voices, not screaming, just names. Names of passengers who never reached shore. Thomas had discovered the truth. The lighthouse did not shine only for living ships. It also held back the memory of the one it failed to save. If the light stopped completely, the Marabelle returned. And each time it returned, someone had to guide it away. Claire stared at the old ship in the fog. "So you've been here since 1987? Thomas smiled sadly. "Longer than that in some ways." "Are you alive?" He looked at the lantern. "I am the keeper." That was all he said. The ship moved closer. The lantern flame grew weaker. Thomas handed it to Claire. "My time is ending." "No," she said. "I'm leaving." Thomas nodded. "You can, but the light will stop." Claire looked down at Bellport, where tiny house lights glowed along the harbor. She imagined fishermen crossing the dark water, families sleeping near the shore, ships trusting a beam they did not understand. Then she looked at the approaching vessel, old, silent, full of shadows at its windows. The lighthouse glass trembled. Claire lifted the lantern. The blue flame turned gold. The main beam began rotating again, slowly at first, then brighter, stronger. It swept across the water and struck the ghostly ship directly. For one impossible moment, Claire saw faces at the windows. Men, women, children. Not frightening, only sad. The Marabelle turned away from the rocks. Its lights faded into the fog. The sea became calm.
When Claire woke, it was morning. She was lying on the floor of the lantern room. Thomas was gone. The brass lantern sat beside her, cold and empty. Her camera had recorded only static after midnight, but one frame remained clear. Claire standing beside the lantern, and behind her, Thomas Reed watching the sea. She returned to Bellport, changed. Martin Hale saw her at the harbor and understood without asking. "You went inside." Claire nodded. "What did you see?" She looked toward Greyhaven. "The reason it never turns off." Martin removed his cap and lowered his eyes. No one in town questioned her again. Claire never released the documentary. Instead, she moved into the old keeper's house and restored it. The town called her strange. Some called her brave. Every evening at sunset, Claire climbed the spiral staircase with the brass lantern in her hand. She checked the glass, cleaned the lens, watched the horizon. And every night, Greyhaven light turned across the Atlantic, slow, steady, silent. Years later, visitors still came to Bellport. They photographed the lighthouse from the beach. They asked why it was always lit. The locals smiled and said it was automatic. But sailors knew better. Sometimes, during heavy fog, they saw a second light moving inside the tower, a small lantern carried by a woman walking the stairs. And on certain winter nights, when the sea became strangely quiet, a large old ship appeared far beyond the reef. It never reached the rocks. The lighthouse always found it first. Because Greyhaven Light was not just a warning, it was a promise made to the lost, to the living, and to everyone who travels through darkness hoping someone, somewhere, is still watching. That is why the lighthouse never turned off, and why, as long as the sea remembers, someone must keep the light burning. The end. The Hotel Room Nobody Could Book, an original mystery story. In the heart of Chicago, between glass office towers and old brick theaters, stood the Ellington Hotel. It had opened in 1928. Its lobby was filled with marble floors, gold lamps, velvet chairs, and a grand staircase that curved like something from another century. Celebrities had stayed there. Politicians had given speeches there. Newlyweds had taken photographs beneath its crystal chandelier. But the Ellington was famous for one thing no brochure ever mentioned: Room 714, a room nobody could book. The hotel computer showed no room 714. The elevator skipped from 713 to 715. The hallway map showed only a blank wall where the room should have been. New employees were told the same simple rule: if a guest asks about room 714, say it doesn't exist. Most employees followed the rule without asking questions. But Maya Collins was not like most employees. She was 26, newly hired at the front desk, and fascinated by old buildings. On her first night shift, while checking old reservation files, she found a yellowed guest card from 1954. The name had faded, the date was unreadable, but the room number was clear: 714. Maya frowned. If the room didn't exist, why did the hotel once rent it? At 2:17 a.m., the lobby phone rang. Maya answered politely. "Front desk, how may I help you?" For a moment there was only static. Then a woman's voice whispered, "I'd like to book room 714. Maya felt the air around her turn cold. "I'm sorry, we don't have that room." The woman sighed softly. "You always say that." The line went dead. Maya stared at the phone. Then she noticed the reservation computer. A new booking had appeared. No guest name, no payment, no check-in time. Only one line: Room 714, occupied. The next morning, Maya asked the manager, Mr. Bell, about it. His expression changed immediately. "Delete it." "But how did it get there?" "Delete it, Maya." "Is there really a room 714? Mr. Bell looked toward the elevators. There was. That evening, after most guests had gone upstairs, Maya searched the hotel archives. In a dusty storage room behind the ballroom, she found old blueprints. The 7th floor layout from 1928 clearly showed room 714 between 713 and 715. But on later blueprints, the room had vanished, replaced by a wall. The change happened in 1954, the same year as the guest card. Maya kept searching. At the bottom of a filing cabinet, she found a newspaper clipping. Hotel guest disappears during winter storm. The article described a woman named Evelyn Hart, a concert pianist from Boston. She had checked into room 714 on December 18, 1954. A blizzard struck Chicago that night. By morning, Evelyn was gone. Her luggage remained. Her coat remained. Her shoes were still beside the bed. The room was locked from the inside, but Evelyn Hart had disappeared. Police found no evidence of escape, no hidden door, no broken window, no sign of violence. Only one strange detail. The hotel clock in the room had stopped at exactly 2:17 a.m. After the investigation failed, the hotel sealed the room. Officially, it was for renovation. Unofficially, it was never opened again. Maya should have stopped there, but curiosity is a dangerous thing in old hotels. That night, at 2:17 a.m., the lobby lights flickered. The elevator doors opened by themselves. No one stepped out. Inside, the button for the 7th floor was glowing. Maya stood frozen behind the desk. Then the lobby phone rang again. She answered slowly. The same woman's voice whispered, "Please don't leave me waiting." The elevator doors remained open. Maya took the old blueprint, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped inside. The doors closed. The elevator rose. When it reached the 7th floor, the hallway was silent. Room 713 stood on the left. Room 715 stood on the right. Between them was only wallpaper. Maya touched the wall. It felt warm. Behind it, she heard music. A piano. Soft, distant,
playing the same few notes again and again. She pressed her ear closer. The wallpaper peeled beneath her fingers. Behind it was a brass door handle. Maya pulled. A hidden door opened. Room 714 was still there. The room looked untouched by time. A green velvet armchair stood beside the window. A suitcase rested near the bed. A pair of black shoes sat neatly on the floor. On the table was a silver clock. Its hands pointed to 2:17. But the strangest thing was the window. Outside was not modern Chicago. Outside, snow fell over the city of 1954. Old cars lined the street. Neon signs glowed in the storm. People moved below in heavy coats and hats. Maya stepped backward. Then the bathroom door opened. A woman stood there, elegant, pale, wearing a dark blue dress. Evelyn Hart.
"You found the room," Evelyn said. Maya could barely speak. "You're alive?" Evelyn smiled sadly. "I'm waiting." "For what?" "For someone to finish the song." She pointed toward the piano near the window. Maya had not noticed it before. The instrument was covered in dust, except for the keys. They were perfectly clean. Evelyn explained slowly. On the night she disappeared, she had been composing a final piece of music, a song for her younger brother, who had vanished years earlier during the war. She believed if she could finish it, she could finally let him go. But at 2:17 a.m., as the storm raged outside, she heard her brother's voice from the hallway. She opened the door, and room 714 changed. The hotel became trapped between two moments, one in 1954, one in the present. Evelyn never left. The room never moved forward, and every person who tried to book it after that heard the same unfinished melody. Maya looked at the sheet music on the piano. The final page was blank. "I don't know how to play," she whispered. Evelyn looked toward the stopped clock. "You don't have to play perfectly. You only have to listen." Maya sat at the piano. The room grew colder. Outside the window, snow fell harder. She placed her fingers on the keys. At first, nothing happened. Then the melody came to her, soft, slow, almost like a memory that wasn't hers. She played one note, then another. The song filled the room. Evelyn closed her eyes. For the first time, the stopped clock began to tick. 2:18. The walls trembled. The window changed. 1954 flickered into modern Chicago, then back again. Evelyn whispered, "He's here." A young soldier appeared near the doorway, not frightening, not solid, only a shape made of light and snow. Evelyn covered her mouth. "Samuel." The soldier smiled. "I waited for you to stop waiting." Evelyn began to cry. Maya continued playing. The final notes came gently, like falling snow. When the song ended, the room became silent. The soldier held out his hand. Evelyn turned to Maya. "Thank you." Then she stepped toward him. The two figures faded into the stormlight. The clock struck once, and room 714 finally moved forward. Maya woke on the hallway floor. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The wall between room 713 and 715 was solid again. But something had changed. The hallway map now showed room 714. The hotel computer listed it as available. Mr. Bell found Maya sitting near the elevator. When she told him what happened, he said nothing for a long time. Finally, he whispered,
My grandfather was working here that night. He always said the room wasn't haunted. He said it was lonely. The hotel renovated room 714 that spring, not as a normal hotel room, as a small music room. The piano was restored. The old clock was placed under glass. And on the wall, they hung a photograph of Evelyn Hart, smiling beside a grand piano in 1954. Guests often asked if they could stay in the room. The answer was always no. Not because it was cursed, not anymore, but because some rooms are not meant for sleeping. Some rooms are meant for remembering. Years later, Maya became the Ellington Hotel's historian. She gave tours through the lobby and ballroom. She told stories about famous guests, hidden staircases, and the golden age of Chicago hotels. At the end of every tour, someone always asked about room 714. Maya would smile and say, "It exists now, but you still can't book it." "Why not?" She would lead them to the 7th floor. Behind a polished wooden door, a piano rested quietly beneath warm light. Sometimes, if visitors listened closely, they heard a few soft notes playing by themselves. Not sad, not frightening, peaceful, as if someone had finally finished a song that had been waiting for 70 years. And every night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the clock inside room 714 ticks once. Only once. A gentle reminder that not every disappearance is an ending. Sometimes it is only a story waiting for the right person to open the door. The end.